Hello. Finally here. I hate to be late. I hate to even be a few minutes late. First thing, let me know if you can hear me. I'm actually probably going to take my headphones out because it's been an issue for a while, but I cannot hear myself. And it drives me nuts because I like to be able to hear what I sound like. So first, right off the bat, let me know if you can hear me. Okay, great. Thank you, Zay. It's also overwhelming to come in here and the chat is like already, whoa, so much happening. Okay, so I'm gonna just do this because I don't need that anyways. I can't even hear myself. Super annoying. Really interesting topics today. We're gonna be talking about boys on the internet and what it means for girls on the internet. Really, ultimately, that's what matters to us, right? As girls on the internet. I've got a great article today. It's super long. So, buckle up, strap in. It's going to be really, really, it's a juicy one though. I have to say, I normally don't read the articles before we do the streams. And I read this one all the way through, even though it's super long. And I have ADHD. That's one reason I like to read the articles on stream, is because it helps me focus when I'm reading it. But I read the first bit of this article and I just could not put it down. It is just so insane. It's just every aspect of it's totally insane. And just the fact that this is really happening with real kids in this era. So the story is from 2017, but no doubt similar things are happening today. Secret Squirrel Girl 007. Heyo, just got diagnosed with ADHD yesterday. Welcome to the club. Those of us with attention issues, probably many of us at this point. Before we get into this article, I want to talk about something that happened on Reddit yesterday, very topical to the conversation of boys on the internet. And I have some hastily thrown together screenshots. Some screenshots I took. Okay, so what happened? Well, we have a beloved subreddit that some of you are on and know about. I'm not going to mention the name of it, although as far as I know, it's private and it's probably not coming back from being private. And I'm not one of the people who's in it anymore. I was a poster there. I was a commenter there. I had a lot of karma there or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Reddit. Why am I still on it? Why are any of us still on it? Puts on hazmat suit. Very, very true. I have quit Facebook and Instagram, and I will not go on those platforms, give them any content, produce anything for them, because I think Mark Zuckerberg is evil. And I think what they did during the last election was totally evil and awful outcome for our country. And I just cannot support that. Any time you spend on there, any content you post on there, you are making them money. And I don't want to do that. Same thing with TikTok. TikTok is partially owned by the Chinese government, which endorses or whatever slave labor in China. There's a lot of censorship. There's a lot of weird disinformation that's posted on TikTok. And so I won't use TikTok. I will not go on there. I would never post anything on there. I don't look at it, whatever. A lot of TikTok content filters out to YouTube anyways. Obviously YouTube is less actually popular than TikTok right now, and it's less competitive. And you can see that YouTube's trying to change to that TikTok model. And I've definitely noticed that. And I've been posting shorts more, and you can see how they're really trying to, they even have a For You page basically on the shorts now. So anyways, my point is, I've given up Facebook slash Instagram, and I've given up or I don't use TikTok. But why don't I give up Reddit? Reddit is a porn site. And there's a lot of illegal stuff on there. There's a lot of exploitative stuff on there. There's a lot of stuff that promotes misogyny and just awful content towards women, violence towards women. And it all just, it all flies there. And I'm having trouble giving up Reddit. Like I have a hard and fast line with Facebook and Instagram, and I loved Instagram. I think as a format, it's a fantastic format, or it used to be when I was on it many years ago. Facebook, I think, is super boring and lame as a format, and I don't use TikTok, so whatever. But I have a hard and fast rule because just morally and ethically, I cannot use those platforms. But for some reason, Reddit, yeah, I think Meowdy says it. Reddit is so versatile. It's hard for a lot of people to walk away forever. It's the best collection of information on virtually any topic you could want. I mean, there's experts on everything on there. It's so hard. It's really almost necessary to use it, So it sucks that it has that side of it to it that is pornography. Essentially it's a porn site with other helpful information on it. You could look at it that way. Meowdy has some suggestions for okay, so I'm getting to the point. There are some great female oriented subs on there, subreddits. Secret Squirrel Girl likes the cat subs. My favorite is Illegally Small Cats. Anyways, there was a great subreddit. I won't mention the name, but some of you know the name. I've mentioned it here and there before. And it didn't get brigaded because of anything I've ever said about it. It got posted, I guess, on the main page. Someone posted or reposted a post on there into r/facepalm, and that got spread around. And the post was about, the dangers of having male children, and how, pretty often men grow up to perpetrate violence or misogyny against women, and how toxic that is. And if you have male children, it's really not a feminist action or anything like that, whatever. I've made that argument many times before. I've been kicked out of feminist spaces for making that argument, even though I don't think it's that crazy. But that got shared and the subreddit got brigaded. And I want to show you just some of the things that I screenshotted, which are not the most extreme things that were posted there. But I think kind of, there was a range, and this is fairly representative. So let's take a look. And I just threw this together super quick, so hopefully. Oh, look, another tirade directed at men, as if gender somehow determines who you are. You're a bigot. That's what is occurring. You're being called out for being a bigot, and that makes you uncomfortable. You want to get in your clan robes and sit with your clan buddies. Unfortunately, you and your cultists are posting to a public space. So again, this is from a female-oriented subreddit, which is really just a bunch of women sitting quietly, talking amongst themselves. Female-only spaces on the internet. We are not breeding Elliot Rodger type people, right? We're the little girls in the corner of the classroom, sitting amongst ourselves, wanting to play with our dolls and, whatever, talk about reality. Leave us alone. This is separatism. So the idea that we can have a separatist space that men won't invade, whatever. Okay. Y'all crazy AF. Zesty says women be chilling and men be like, but what about us? Right? Enlightened Female says wrongs: one, gender, not sex; two, it's your, not your; three, conflating biological race, biological reality with the racist hate groups. Obviously, women talking about reality is perceived as being hateful or being a hate group. If a woman says, please, a man raping a woman, that's a hate. If the woman says, please stop raping me, that's also hate, right? Please don't rape me. Please stop raping me. Okay, then that's the woman perpetrating hate against that man, because that's his sort of natural right, to rape the woman and say these horrible things about her. That's the man's natural right. So if you try to take that natural right away from him, then you're the evil one. You're the nasty one. Women, post your height and weight so we know whose opinion matters more. And there was a lot of, many comments and posts. All the women here are obese. Okay, which honestly, nothing wrong with being obese. You know, people come in all shapes and sizes. However, it's like saying, I don't know. In a way, I think it's the new women are ugly, right? Like we care so much about our looks, like our value is only in our looks. So post your height and weight so we know whose opinion matters more. Here's someone who has a pro-life take, and this is obviously a pro-choice environment. We think fetuses are human and abortion is the murder of an innocent baby. Fetus equals baby. Guess it's to be expected that pro-child murderers would use a disingenuous representation of the opposition to justify their unhinged and frankly appalling ideologies. So again, another thing that comes up very frequently in these comments: unhinged, crazy, insane. Women are women's worst enemies, and B words like you are making life miserable for your own sex. You give reasons to the incels to do the stuff they do. Have fun messing up your chances of actually progressing in society. I love this comment. It's like packed full of content, right? This is amazing. Women are women's worst enemies. Well, I kind of agree with that. Sometimes that can be true. B words like you are making life miserable for your own sex. So it's the women who are recognizing male violence. It's the women who are calling it out and, hey, we want a safe separatist space away from men. No, you should be going along with it. You should be having babies, and that will make other women happier. How is women choosing to not have babies making other women more miserable? That I don't understand. You give reasons to the incels to do the stuff they do. Okay, so what do incels do? I know he's referring to the Elliot Rodger types, right? You give reasons to the Elliot Rodgers types to do what they do. In other words, they're not responsible for their actions. You are responsible for their actions, for rejecting men and calling out male violence. Have fun messing up your chances of actually progressing in society. This is not how you do feminism, ladies. Thank you, Existential. Existential is always with a good take. It's the women blowing sunshine up other women's asses about men and motherhood that are betraying their sex. There's a lot of propaganda that comes from women. There's a lot of hiding the reality of birth and motherhood and dating men that comes from women. That's why I read that post on my channel yesterday about the woman just being real about her physical reaction to having a baby, and her postpartum, she became very sick, and she, was like, wait a second, everyone told me to do this, and it's just not worked out. Oh, great. And white and female. Probably all these men call themselves progressive. Without a doubt, without a doubt. Oh, y'all are nice. Please do like the stream. Sure helps out with my self-esteem. This sub is forgetting they were swimming in a man's balls not too long ago. LMAO. Okay. So it's not that we were gestated in a woman's womb for 9 months. It's that we were swimming in a man's balls. That is the relevant part of the reproductive cycle, the man's contribution, which I will remind you for the 1000th time is just to ejaculate and then leave. And many men do leave permanently after that contribution. Meanwhile, the woman has to have periods for 40 years of her life, and a varying hormonal cycle that causes us lots of issues. Then when you do go on to, if you do go on to get pregnant and have a baby, there are plenty of health issues that come along with that, even in healthy pregnancies. So, not the gratefulness, the gratitude is not for the women, though. The gratitude is for the sperm. This entire sub is pretty much just hate speech and mental illness. Again, mental illness comes up. Women speaking the truth, women recognizing male violence is a form of mental illness, because a normal, mentally healthy woman ignores the reality of mental illness. And women do not speak like this about men. It's insane. The problem is men, not people, men. Always. It's something I've tried to be very conscious in my usage of language, is to, when I'm speaking about women, to say women and not people, although women are people, of course. And when I'm speaking about men, to say men and not say, oh, people are so violent. No, men are so violent. People are victims of male violence. No, women are victims of male violence. Well, men are also victims of male violence. So I guess in that instance. Yes, another sub where hate is willfully encouraged by a bunch of losers that are so angry with themselves. They once again created a tribalistic monkey brain space to regurgitate hate upon hate of everyone else because they can't take care of themselves. Sure, not wanting to have children is fine and valid. Having that preference is valid. But one look through these posts and comments within the posts, you can see how hate-fueled and deranged many of you are. It's just another sub for female version of incels, femcells, which I've talked about before. I personally don't believe in the concept of female incels. Every woman can have sex. You want to have sex? That exists. Not true of men, but women, yes. Why so many downvotes? Did they forget that everything they use and live under was created by men? They wouldn't even know how to fix appliances. You dropped this, by the way, your crown. You'd all be effed without men, and you know it. A bunch of you women here are just straight sad. You experience some bad days with a man and just think all men are the same. You hate seeing men successful, even if they have a harder life than you. You're blind to the wrongdoings that women commit if it's against a man, just because you hate men. And hell, if men never existed, neither would you. And all your complaining. So be grateful to men that you get to live in houses made by them. That's something, that's kind of a common thing we hear. Sometimes we even hear that from feminists, right? Be grateful. Men invented the internet that we're all on right now. Men invented all the pollutants that are in our body, all the different types of microplastics that are in our cells. Men invented that too. Wow, I'm so grateful. All you women on here, I'm so done with men. Oh, look, a penis. Mentally challenged people, I think he meant to say women, when there's a 50% chance of a male baby. What is this sub, bait or mental retardation? Well, since you girls are so open with how you feel about men, guess I'll give my opinion on the opposite sex too. What do I like most in women? My dick. So there you have it. It was actually a woman who invented the internet. So, all right. Anyways, we have that. And now we're going to get into our article. Y'all ready? So, one thing I wanted to say is I believe that posts and comments like that are made by very young men. It it's possible, but it's hard for me to even conceptualize that an adult man would spend their time in that manner making posts like that. So I really think those are like 11 to 12-year-old boys who like have never gotten any attention from a woman before. And this is a way for them to get attention from a woman. Because to come onto a women's subreddit that they didn't even know, like nobody knew this subreddit existed, right? This was like a tiny, tiny little community. It's like, here's automatic attention from a woman. You're never going to be able to get it anywhere else. But I do think that these are young men. Does that make it any better than if these are adult men? No. In fact, I find it even more disturbing because I think that there are, the idea that an 11 to 12-year-old boy feels a sense of entitlement over women or girls or whatever, just to harass, abuse, etc. That entitlement comes from such a young age. Where does it come from? Where does it come from? I think, honestly, I have argued long and hard that it's male nature. Maybe you can train it out of them the way you can you tame a wolf? I don't know. It's in the DNA. There's not even any doubt in my mind about that. Have you ever watched like a 2-year-old little boy play? I have. I've watched a 2-year-old little boy play with his infant sister and beat the crap out of her, basically. They're violent from early on. There's no socialization. Yeah, there's no socialization. Socialization happens in the strands of DNA, right? Maybe in an optimal world we could socialize it out of them, but they are not socialized to be like that. That's the point, is that's nature. That's nature. And I do find it disturbing that even that young age that they feel a sense of entitlement to post this really vile stuff. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the article today. By the way, if you're new here, my name's Lisa. I don't think I introduced myself. I am your hostess. Our Friday streams, we read an article together. Feel free. We got a great crowd here today. The chat is already on fire. I'm really glad about that because I wasn't sure if people would be interested in this article. So hopefully you'll be interested in it. Stick with it. Like I said, it's a pretty long article. I'll be here for as long as it takes to go over it. I have one other little topic that I want to share after. And yeah, I'm just really excited to get into this article. It's so well written, and it's just a mind-boggling story. So let's do it. Let's do it to it. Okay. Y'all ready? Y'all ready for this? The Instagram account that shattered a California high school. Okay, before we get started, I just want to check in with the chat. Tori says, I hate how other feminists get angry at us for saying males being violent is inherent. No one wants to believe it or admit it. Look around. All you have to do is open your eyes. All you have to do is look at every other species in nature practically. It's so common. The fact that it pervades every social structure, um, every economic class, every economic structure, every age group. It's every era of history, every country, every part of the world. Virtually. Yeah, maybe there are some exceptions. I feel like the exceptions actually prove the rule. And this is such a great point too. Bastet Owl says there is no socialization. We live in a boys will be boys society. A lot of people make excuses for this kind of behavior. Meowdy says violence is always a choice no matter what you've been through. And I definitely agree with that. And when I've talked about this idea that violence is part of their nature, I've also said there are a lot of things that are part of our nature. Just because something's part of your nature doesn't mean you have to act on it. And for example, if I'm hungry, do I go into a bakery and jump over the counter and grab a handful of cake and stuff it in my face? No, because I've socialized to not do that. Even though I have that urge, I have that natural desire, right? If I'm out in a crowd in the town square and I got to pee, do I just squat down and pee? No, that is my nature to relieve myself, but I am socialized to find a bathroom and do it the right way, right? So just because something is in someone's nature, it's not. I think that why people become so offended by that idea is they think, well, my nature is to be a rapist. So you're saying I can never overcome that and it's my destiny to be a rapist and I don't want to be a rapist. Well, good. Then don't be one. Okay. Just because it's in your nature doesn't mean you have to act on your nature. You can actually transcend above it. But if we ignore the fact that it's their nature, we're never going to ever address really the root of the problem or ever hope to find a solution to it. So I've said all of these things many, many, many times over the course of many, many videos. So yeah. And this is a good point. Julie says anger seems to be the default expression for any male emotion. I don't know whether it's innate or just society's preference, but the outcome for women is never pleasant as a result. And I will say, yeah, if anything, men are socialized to be, to enhance this nature aspect, right? Like we do socialize men to be like, oh, boys don't cry. Oh, crying, that's for girls. So they don't have another way to, another outlet for their emotions. We also don't consider anger to be an emotion usually, right? Like we consider to be anger to be more justified, and emotions are sort of like self-indulgent or something. And Paxton says you'd have to consistently socialize them against what our patriarchal society entices them to do. They have little incentive to not be awful people. And once again, we do socialize them to be the worst expression. Like the socialization just enhances the nature. We are not socializing them to be tame wolves. We are still socializing them to express that natural urge even more. The Instagram account that shattered a California high school, it had barely a dozen followers, but the discovery of its racist post turned a Bay Area community against itself and changed students' lives forever. I just got chills because I cannot wait to share this article with you all. You're going to be rocked. It is insane. And I love the illustrations here too. They're really gorgeous and they fit the story so well. By Dashka Slater. This is from adapted from a book that she's written on this event that happened. Earlier this summer, Melissa Fole, an elementary school principal in Albany, California, was sitting cross-legged on a friend's couch, drinking coffee and scrolling through the emails that had accumulated while she was on a brief end-of-school year vacation when she opened a message from her school's district superintendent. It was short and to the point. On June 20th, the United States Supreme Court had declined to hear the last remaining appeal from the last remaining lawsuit stemming from an Instagram account that convulsed Albany High School in 2017. When the account was discovered, Full was in her first year as a high school assistant principal after spending a decade teaching elementary school. A biracial Asian and white woman with wavy silver hair, expressive brown eyes, and a silver hoop in one nostril, she had known many of the students embroiled in the Instagram account since they were in third grade and had been personally named in some of the ensuing lawsuits. Now she put down her coffee and began to cry. It was such a huge relief that this whole thing is done, she says. Done and yet also not done, because Albany, a liberal, affluent town of about 20,000 people in the Bay Area, is still struggling with the aftermath. So it's 6 years later, they're still struggling with the aftermath of this Instagram account that had 13 followers. If this doesn't make you want to know what was in this account, I don't know. I think the way this is written, it's really she builds the suspense really, really well. It was a private Instagram account with barely more than a dozen followers. Few people saw it when it was live, yet its discovery derailed lives, shredded relationships, and caused families to flee both the town and its public schools. What happened in Albany happened online, but the repercussions played out everywhere people gathered, in homes and schools, at supermarkets, and on sports fields, on Facebook, and next door. Okay, so this is an Instagram account with 13 followers, and it had this insane impact. Can you imagine? Insane. Part of the injury was to the town's self-regard. Albany is so tiny that people who live there call it Smallbany, bordered by Berkeley to the south and east, by the gray-blue waters of San Francisco Bay to the west, and by El Cerrito to the north. Albany is just under 2 square miles. It isn't one of those fancy suburbs with gated communities and sprawling McMansions. It feels like a funky little backwater. The homes are mostly stucco bungalows or shingled with wood, the yards and porches festooned with rainbow flags and Black Lives Matter signs. How many of y'all have been to the Bay Area or familiar with it at all? I've only been there once, but I can picture this pretty easily. We went there a few years ago, and yeah, it's definitely a really interesting place. We went to Berkeley on our trip. We went to UC Berkeley, has an amazing botanical garden if you're ever there. We went to Oakland, San Francisco. So I haven't spent much time there, but I've been there. So it's the importance of travel to give you context to be able to picture this town in your mind, you know? Are we having issues with the chat? Almost half the residents are white, and more than a quarter are Asian. 13% are Latino. You could call it diverse, and you probably do if you're white, but it doesn't feel as diverse to Black residents, who make up just over 4% of the population. I think that's a really interesting way to put that. As a white person, I would say that makeup is pretty diverse, but 4% Black is way below the national average, I think, national average is 13%, I think, or something like that, 13 or 17%. So yeah. It isn't that diverse economically either. Median household income is above $113,000. Nationally, the figure is about $70,000, so it's a little more upper middle class. Parents shoehorn themselves into Albany's modest dwellings for 1 key reason: the schools. If you're one of Albany's roughly 1,200 high school students, you know you're lucky to be there. So that's interesting. This size of this town is about the size of the town I grew up in, and my high school also had 1,200 kids, so I can definitely relate to this and kind of picture this in my mind. And my racial makeup, my school was definitely like a lot more white than that, but this is it's that to me personally, this is like a familiar. But of course, I went to school before the internet. So that's one reason the Instagram account was so painful. The schools, 3 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 traditional 4-year high school are what bind Albany together. I think that's very true of small town life, is that like the school is the school or school system is like the heart of the town life. After the account's discovery, they were also what wedged it apart. The divisions remain in place. At the town's middle school graduation this June, parents whose children had been on opposite sides of the chasm opened by the account sat on 2 rows apart from one another and didn't speak. At the high school, where disciplinary policies and much of the curriculum have been revamped in the account's wake, teachers deployed competing narratives about how exactly the events should be interpreted, with some seeing them as a calamity that occurred despite Albany's particular virtues, small, liberal, educated, interconnected, and others as a consequence of Albany's particular shortcomings: too white, too insular, too wealthy, too obsessed with academic achievement. Radical says, my school had 800-ish kids and 3 Black students, all siblings, so white. Yeah, I think we had maybe 3 or 4 in my grade. Pretty darn white. The questions that the account raised about fighting bigotry, about the impacts of social media, and about the best way to respond when young people in your community fail so utterly to live up to the values you thought you shared had no simple answer. Whatever you believed about Albany, about America, about teenagers, racism, sexism, incidentally, we're going to get into the sexism aspect of this, or the misogyny aspect, because this is, I think, like basically one of the only times in the article they mention that, even though I think virtually all of the perpetrators were males and all of the victims were female. Social media, punishment, public discourse on each of these topics. The story of the Instagram account could be marshaled as evidence. It was the incident that explained everything, and yet also the incident that couldn't be explained. But I have tried. I have spent more than 5 years reporting on what happened, conducting hundreds of hours of interview and reviewing thousands of pages of legal documents, as well as police reports, social media posts, letters, diaries, photographs, text messages, videos, and public testimony. So really interesting. Y'all are sharing in the chat like what your high schools were like. Enlightened Female said, perfectly describes my hometown. Besides the racial makeup, my town is about 90% white, with the remaining 10% being mostly Native American, Latino, and African American. Existential says, my New England small town school had literally 2 to 4 Black kids at any given time. And that was a reason for me why I chose a college that was very diverse. One of the most diverse, racially diverse private colleges, I think, in America, is because I wanted to experience, people from other cultures, and definitely got to do that. And it was very good for me. I think, that's, I think it was very good for me. It sounds kind of self-centered, but like, it is good. It's good to be exposed to different cultures and people who had different upbringings than you. That's a great thing. And I think the more we do that, the less racism there would be, right? Does racism come somewhat from siloization of all of our different, you know, I think it's let me just say, I think it's very important to experience each other's cultures and coexist and learn from each other and eat each other's food. It's like the event that tore apart our city, says Kim Trutain, who was on the school board at the time and now works as the district spokeswoman. More than that, it kind of ripped our hearts because everyone was just like, how could this have happened? How could such a hurtful and damaging thing have happened in Albany? Okay, so now we are how many paragraphs into this, and we talk about bearing the lead, right? By this point in the article, I feel very intrigued to know what was in this Instagram account with 13 followers that tore this town apart. Basically, that's how powerful these teenage boys posting on the internet, like, it's not just some trivial thing, right? This is power. Like, they actually have this power to tear their town apart by what they post on the internet. Wow. Imagine knowing you have that power. That's intense. That's a power a lot of people would want to have. And unfortunately, they used it for evil and not good. With great power comes great responsibility. For A, and I believe, I'm going to guess based on this story, that the video that I posted on my community tab, that is A. So she doesn't use any kids' actual names in this article, but if you look at news stories, they do show the kids and the parents' names. And based on the circumstance, I think the gal in the video that I posted is the girl she's talking about. So if you saw that video in my community post, I just did some like searching around here to see, because when you hear how explosive this is, yeah, anyways. For A, it all started a little before 11 a.m. on March 20th, 2017. A junior at Albany High School, she had just left her third period culinary arts class when she was met by a group of girls, most of them Black. Okay, we've got to tell you something, one of them said. Like, we have to tell you. A waited impatiently. It was probably just some kind of boy drama, but it wasn't. Not the kind of boy drama she was expecting anyway. There's a racist Instagram account, the girls told her. A bunch of people are following it, and there's pictures of you on it. I just got chills again. Put yourself in this girl's shoes. I mean, like, I'm telling you, I'm getting chills thinking about this. Yes. My heart sank. I'm anxious now because this is like, we all exist in this world, right? And this, when you've been targeted for bullying, it's just so awful. And there's a specific feeling that goes along with that. Everyone at school, it seemed, had at least 2 Instagram accounts. The curated ones that your relatives and people from other schools could see, and a more informal spam or Finsta account for posting memes, rants, and candids for your inner circle. But this account was something else. Again, I love these illustrations. This cherry sundae or whatever almost looks like shards of glass and blood and stuff. And I just love how she did the like this neon look of the lights. Beautiful. Enlightened Female mentions that it's like I'm reading the exact same story that happened in my school district, only different that it happened on Snapchat. And I wonder how many, this is one instance. There's got to be a lot of these that never even make the news, Existential says, I can't imagine what kids growing up with the internet have to endure. As much as I've endured as an adult, I've been an adult. I haven't been a vulnerable child having to put up with the things I put up with as far as bullying on the internet. I can't imagine doing it without a developed prefrontal cortex and perspective and other things going on in my life and stuff. This is why high school girls, KTS, two of the girls in the hallway, one of them Black and one Asian, were the ones who had seen it. Over the weekend, they had been hanging out with one of their close friends, a biracial white and Mexican boy whose name was Murphy. By the way, this story mentions lots of different people, so try to keep it straight, and I'll try to help with that too. Because there's a lot of characters in this story, and they kind of come at you fast. Because they were minors at the time, all the young people in this article are referred to by their initials, middle names, or nicknames. Murphy and the two girls had gone to see the movie Get Out, ironic, and afterward he had shown them a private account created by another friend, a Korean American boy whose middle name was Charles. It featured memes about Black girls' hair, about slavery, about lynching. Okay, and Terrifying Renegade Pearl says something similar happened at my school too. And Zay says, I've been online bullied, so horrible. I was 12 to 15. And Lily says, I'm sorry, so sorry you had to endure that. That's awful for someone so young. I totally agree. So the irony that they had gone to see Get Out, a movie about racism. And I mean, the first thing that struck out to me about this is the boy who had created this account himself was Korean American. A minority race. Like, there's no solidarity amongst minority people like that. I don't want to, well, okay. There's always this idea of kind of kicking down or punching down or whatever. So as a Korean American, he is a racial minority, but then there's a racial minority that's even lower social status. So that's who he chose to pick on, right? He's not making fun of white people. No punching up, no solidarity, total punching down. Expired says, I'm Black and have done a lot of work in K-pop, not surprising at all. And Lily says, the headbutting between minority groups is so discouraging. Not that everybody has to like hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but like, my God, like at least not do this shit, right? Most of the girls gathering around A were in tears. In other words, this is the trauma response, middle of a traumatic experience. They had known Charles and many of the account's followers, 13 followers, for years. So this is also a very heartbreaking aspect of this story, is these people were all in the same friend group. So these girls were in this friend group with this guy, Charles, and the other guys who were posting on this account or who were commenting on it. Zay says, oh my gosh, not at all. There's a lot of infighting. There's no solidarity at all. This is such a betrayal. What do we always say about male friends? A multiracial group of extended friends, they had slept over at one another's houses, hung out together in class and at lunch, lounged around after school watching movies. Several of them were even planning to go to prom together. These are the guys you're going to go to prom with. They're posting racist posts about you. A was one of the only girls who wasn't surprised. She slammed her fist into a wall. I should have listened to my mom, she thought. I should have done something to prevent this. Of course, it wasn't her responsibility at all. The responsibility always exclusively falls on the perpetrators of this kind of stuff. But A remembers feeling out of place in Albany from the time she transferred into the school district in the third grade, and the feeling intensified when she went to high school. She had a Black father and a white mother, and it seemed clear to her that she wasn't the kind of girl that Albany boys liked. Those girls wore Lululemon leggings, tossed their long straight hair over their shoulders, laughed when boys teased them or put them down. Those girls were smart enough to get into a good college, but not outwardly so smart that they made people uncomfortable. A was never going to be one of them. So I think this paragraph right here is just a beautiful description of the struggles and the awkwardness of adolescence for many girls. I, have heard and listening to biracial women speak about their lives that it can be difficult to feel like you don't really fit in with the white kids, you don't really fit in with the Black kids, you're too white to be Black, you're too Black to be white, um, and that can come with its own psychic struggles on top of dealing with, just the normal things and fitting in with your peers in adolescence. It's amazing how many of you are relating to this story so far. Dang, this sounds like something that happened at my school around 2017, which was once I was long gone. And because the region of the country this happened in, I can see how adults might freak out or even turn on each other. And again, this was a town that was very tight knit around the school system. So I definitely come from a town like that everything's sort of oriented around the school system, social world. So I can definitely relate to that too. It wasn't just her brown skin or her curly hair or her low voice. It was something in the way she held herself. Her friends described her as strong, funny, sarcastic, and straightforward. But beneath the confident exterior, she was on shaky ground. Her father had died suddenly just before she started high school, and she had been struggling with depression ever since. So, this is interesting. The fact that they would target a girl who other people saw as strong, funny, sarcastic, and straightforward. Almost like just wanting to pick on someone who actually seems that they have some self-confidence and some self-esteem. Girls aren't supposed to have that, so we gotta beat that out of her. A virtual cabbage, once again, I've gone through something very similar. It was during middle school for me. So Ballistic says, sometimes you see minority people punching down, maybe because if you keep someone lower than you, you may avoid the worst types of racism for yourself. Yeah. Existential says, negging, men love to do it. A topic that's been coming up over and over again recently. The problems with Charles and his friends had started a couple of months before. By the way, we still haven't gotten into the contents of the Instagram account. And I will tell you, when I read that, you can see it on the screen. So if you want to read ahead, but my jaw dropped and I just sat there staring at the ceiling for about a minute when I read this. I was just blown away. Anyways, we're about to get there. The problems with Charles and his friends had started a couple of months before. She was in Algebra 2, deep in her own thoughts, when she had felt a hand in her hair. Okay, just ew, right? And I think no one should be touching anybody's hair. Okay. I know personally, as as a white person, I've been curious about people's hair texture who have a different hair texture than me. Um, my lord, especially not without someone's permission, um, and not like it's some exotic pet or something, right? Lily says this makes me sick to my stomach. I totally agree. No one should be touching anybody without their permission. And even then, she was in algebra 2, deep in her own thoughts when she felt a hand in her hair. It belonged to a white boy she sort of knew. They had friends in common. What the hell? Why are you touching me? She swatted the hand away. But of course, as girls, we have to kind of ignore it, right? Oof. Zay says, I have had strangers touch my hair without asking, kids at school too. That's really effed up. Zesty says, I'm a white woman with super curly hair and I never get people touching it. It's definitely a race thing. Julie says, keep your hands to yourself is a kindergarten lesson. Enlightened Female says, I'm white and everyone would always touch my hair because it was super shiny and thick. It was a gross feeling. I can't imagine how bad it is for Black women. Lily says, the entitlement people feel to women's bodies, particularly women of color, is disgusting. 15 Jessica says, I remember people at my very white school were curious about my curly hair, even on other white people. Right. And I actually, okay, don't at me. I don't think there's anything wrong with being curious about something that you have never experienced firsthand, like the texture of somebody's hair. You don't know what it feels like, you know? It's okay to be curious about it. I would never touch somebody's hair, especially not without their permission. Insane. And it's that, again, it's that sense of entitlement. Where does that sense of entitlement come from? Is that sense of entitlement is innate? Is that genetic? Is that DNA, right? Why, no one taught that kid to not touch someone without their consent. Like Sloan says, touching without consent is what gets me. Ice Goddess, why do guys like to touch women's hair, back, the neck too? People don't know how vulnerable that is. Sure. Right? Isn't that what we're told to do when we're in danger? To, protect our organs and stuff. Ooh, this is me too. I don't like being touched either. Being pawed like this wasn't unusual. Whenever she changed her hairstyle, someone's hands would be in it. She wasn't about to make a big deal about it. It was the middle of class. And anyway, if she got into it with everyone who tried to touch her hair, she would be exhausted. So again, so it's so sad, really. Like, it's like this feeling of entitlement. There's really nothing you can do about it. You just have to shrug it off. You just have to be like, oh yeah, that's cool. First thing that comes to my mind is like times I've experienced sexual harassment in the workplace where it's so prevalent, it's happening so much. It's like I wouldn't get anything done if I was calling it out all day, Then a friend showed her a video of the entire interaction that Charles had posted on his Finsta. He had captioned it, touching the nap. This is where my jaw totally dropped. Not only did somebody touch her, one of their classmates filmed it, and then they caption it in the most racist possible way and degrading. Insane. It's so effed up. It was a setup. Oh, God. She confronted Charles on Snapchat. And after some back and forth, he deleted the video. But a few days later, she heard that Charles had posted another classroom photo of her on the same account. This one just showed the back of her head, her bun, her ear, the hood of her sweatshirt. The caption asked whether the photo was of her or another Black girl in the junior class, as if they were impossible to tell apart. This time she confronted Charles in person and made him delete it. Don't post anything else, she told him. We are not cool. Don't talk about me. I know we're all having like a visceral reaction to this because I feel like a lot of us have experienced these situations in one flavor or not, right? And when you've experienced that trauma of bullying, even if you don't have like official PTSD, right? Like it can bring up those same emotions you experienced like that time that you were bullied. So I know a lot of us just saying, oh my God, my stomach dropped, my stomach hurts. I feel sick to my stomach. It's like, yes, that's that feeling. That's a PTSD feeling. And empathy too, right? Like we have empathy for these girls, and the empathy comes from a lot from like, we are human, and we don't want to see anyone go through this. We don't want to go through it. We don't want to see any other girl go through this. Enlightened Female says, I'm getting teary imagining how horrific it was. But the feeling of being watched lingered. It made it hard to go to school. Eventually, at her mother's urging, she talked to Melissa Full, then assistant principal, about what had happened, but she insisted she didn't want the school to take any action. I didn't want more repercussions, A told me during one of the many interviews over the ensuing years. Full remembers wanting to respect the autonomy of a teenager who said she preferred to handle the situation on her own because the people involved were part of her social circle. While it seemed like a messed up thing, Full says, now, I didn't know it was forecasting anything at the time. I sure wish I would have. So again, almost like with the hair touching incident, seeing this horrible Instagram, she's like, I want to live my life. I want this to go away. I want to move forward. I don't want the school to make this any worse by like reprimanding these kids or suspending them or anything. Like I just want to move on. Okay. By noon, the girls' distress. So this is all the same day, right? This is so crazy. By noon, the girls' distress had attracted the attention of the school's administration. Full and the other school's assistant principal, Tammy Banau, ushered them into a conference room. Everyone, it is really an anxious making article, isn't it? Everyone was talking at once. Many were crying. The chaos made it hard to piece together a narrative. Eventually, Banau went to interview Murphy, the boy who revealed the existence of the account, while Full distributed photocopied forms for recording student complaints. Only a couple of them had seen the account firsthand, but now the others remembered the questionable comments and racist jokes they had shrugged off in the past. Everything looked different today. The problem was they didn't have any evidence. Already, the 10 or so girls in the conference room were starting to feel hopeless. It would be their word against the boys, and then everything would go on as normal. Still, they wrote down what they could on the forms. So this is what they wrote down. Private Instagram account of disgusting racist images about multiple Black girls in my grade, making my very close friends bawl their eyes out and have fits of rage. I've heard multiple racist comments made to my friends. This also affects me because I am a Black girl, already am self-conscious of myself. And it's so interesting. Once again, they mentioned sexism at the very beginning of this article. But this is misogyny, right? The boy who created this account and the other people following this account were boys. I think there was one girl following it. And all the victims were girls. All the victims were girls. I think misogyny is so invisible to us, right? It's the water we swim in that people see racism. This is a racist account. No, it's actually a misogynistic account, or as someone pointed out in my comments, misogynoiristic. Um, this is misogyny, and racism is the tool with which these boys are harassing these girls. So, yeah, very blatant example of misogynoir. It's that this is what we talk about also intersectionality, right? It's misogyny, but it's specifically directed at Black girls. And yeah, I think, yeah, like Lily says, misogyny is so pervasive that most people, including women, are totally blind to it. They wouldn't have put Black boys on there in such a degrading way, I guarantee. And yeah, exactly. And that's why I think we need to make the distinction that that misogyny is actually the primary problem here. Again, racism is the cudgel with which the misogyny is being applied. One girl, Carrie, hadn't gone into the conference room. She was close friends with both A and Charles. So both the girl victim and Charles, the kid who was running the Instagram account. The daughter of immigrants from Thailand, she was known for being such a good sport that her friends teased her constantly, particularly about her refusal to say anything bad about anyone, which is actually an incredibly good quality that very few people have. Now she was thinking about how she could get copies of what the other girls had seen on Murphy's phone. So as she walked into her fifth period class, she pulled out her phone and found the Instagram account the girls had been talking about. It was private, so she couldn't see the posts, but the app listed the people she followed who also followed it. One name stood out, a boy of mixed Asian, white, and Latino descent who would, nice they said Latino, not Latinx, who would later be identified in litigation as John Doe. Carrie hardly knew him. They had spoken only once or twice, but they were mutuals on Instagram, and another friend of hers, Rosie, had dated him briefly. Both of them were in psychology, her next class. When she walked into the classroom, she asked Rosie to borrow Doe's phone and meet her in the restroom. So this is a little like kind of impressive how they were able to actually get this access to this Instagram account, private Instagram account. Doe and Rosie have different memories of what Rosie said when she approached him. Rosie, who is white, says she asked him straight up, Carrie says there's this weird racist Instagram account you're following. Can I look at your phone? Doe remembers her offering a made-up excuse, something like, hey, my phone just died and I need to call my parents. They agree that he unlocked his phone and handed it to her. So now she had access. I guess so they had dated or something. They were close friends. And he was following this Instagram account. Yeah, this girl is going full FBI. I love I love it. I love the community this girl is building. Queen shit. Yeah. Reconnaissance skills are on point. I know that's the kind of thing that like right we kind of joke about girls having these internet savvy skills, super sleuth, right? Minutes later, Carrie and Rosie were standing in the middle of the girls' bathroom, their heads bent over the borrowed phone. Carrie took pictures of the screen with her own phone as Rosie scrolled through the account. Some of the posts were the kind of things you might see on any other high schooler's accounts, memes, guys roasting each other, the regular kind of dumb. But the rest were shocking. A half dozen posts mocking different white and Asian girls at their school for their weight or other aspects of their appearance. Which, by the way, is the reason Facebook was created, was to judge women on their appearance. So, you know, these guys are little Mark Zuckerbergs, aren't they? Worst of all was the overt, unfiltered racism. Black men being lynched or beaten, jokes about the Klan, and racist slurs. A screenshot of the Snapchat conversation between Charles and A about the hair touching video that was captioned, "Holy expletive, I'm on the edge of bringing," I can't even read this, awful. You can read it, okay? Y'all can read that. "I'm on the edge of bringing my ROPE to school on Monday. The future of America. Again, misogyny looks like they went. I just like that's a D threat, guys. That's what a D threat looks like. Even if it's like, oh, it's a joke, it's a prank, bro. You know, this is like these young boys are already rotten to the core. It's in the DNA, my friends. It's horrific. It is horrific. It's sociopathic. It's like this is why my jaw dropped and I was just like, a photo of another Black girl and her Black basketball coach with a NOOSE drawn around each of their necks and the caption, "Twinning is winning." It was so much worse than I anticipated, Carrie says. I didn't think I would react that badly, but I was physically shaking. No shit. It's like I'm a fully grown adult woman who's like been through a wide range of life experiences, and like this is shocking to me. Utterly shocking. I will always have a level of mistrust for male friends. Prison now. They're so gross. What the F? Go to the police. Yes, when we were talking earlier, the article's talking about this Instagram account tore this town apart. Well, what possibly could have been on it? It was this. This is it's jaw-dropping. Oh, this is a great question. I want to know if Murphy is a real hero or if he was just trying to show off to the girls he revealed this to. Like, I'm in on this secret thing or whatever. Like, things like this, they do get out eventually. And people will blame the mothers, but let's be honest, society raises them as well. That is male culture. In fact, society is primarily who raises boys. They didn't have much time. If they were gone for long, their teacher would notice. Rosie scrolled, Carrie photographed. She took pictures of the most offensive posts, roughly 24. So there were 24 posts of that nature, of that vile nature, about half of the total. She took pictures of the comments and the list of followers. Then she sent them via airdrop to Full and some of the girls. As A sat in the conference room going through the images, she had trouble taking in what she saw. Then she saw a familiar photo. It had been lifted from her own Instagram account. This part is just like, oh my God. Some of you will know why this just like feels so blah. Like I can't even talk. Her favorite picture from a trip to Lake Tahoe with her best friend. It had been paired with a photo of a gorilla. I just got this stomach feeling of like, wow. Basically, anything I do is not going to be good enough for these people, A told me. I can't even take a picture of myself in the snow looking how I look and post it on Instagram. It's such a like wholesome, innocent thing. She went on a trip. She took a photo. She posted on Instagram. And this is so violating, so vile, like awful. All right. So now let's talk about Charles. Talk about where Charles is in all this. Charles is the one who did all this. Yes, Ice Goddess. Girls get bullied all the time, but tell me more about how girls live on easy mode. It's heartbreaking. You wait till you see where the story goes. We're like, it's still going. Okay, wait till you see where it goes. You're gonna like have blood in your eyes. That night, and also her reaction of anything I do is not going to be good enough for these people. That's so depressing. It's so depressing. Yes, it gets worse. It gets worse. But this idea that it's like she wants to fit in, right? Like we all do, and especially teenage girls. She wants to just fit in and be normal and not stand out. And look at this abuse, this bullying. I can't even imagine. Can't even imagine. That night, Charles sobbing. Okay. Oh, I feel bad for you. Oh, poor Charles is crying about what he did. Okay, you did it. Freaking man up and own up to what you did. You don't get a chance to be sad about this. You're the one who created this. That night, Charles, sobbing, called his sister a female. He called his sister a female because he needed support. Zay. I knew his ass was going to start crying. She wasn't, who was away at college. She wasn't that alarmed at first because he had called her in tears plenty of times. I love that this article outs him. But like, again, not that we should stigmatize men crying, but like, it's not a great look, Charles. Usually after getting into a fight with their mother, who had divorced their father a few years earlier. Which is almost like by mentioning that detail, it's like, oh, well, Charles has this poor home life, so of course he would do something like this. Like, something about the way this is worded is like, oh, I guess it's his mother's responsibility. I don't know. Is that just me? Compared with his sister, who had been both an academic and an athletic superstar in high school, Charles was kind of a slacker. That's a tale as old as time. Smart enough to take AP classes like AP Computer Science and Physics, but not motivated enough to get better than B's and C's. He had a close group of male friends that he hung out with since middle school or even earlier, most of them white or Asian, and he was also tight with a couple groups of Black and Asian girls. With the girls, he tended to let his guard down more, allowing them to glimpse the depression that had dogged him since the collapse of his parents' marriage. His stepfather, who is white, would send him emails brimming with spiritual advice. Depression is one bad habit you cannot afford, he wrote in one. You may have every reason to be depressed, but accepting those reasons will only deepen your depression. Do not give in to the dark side. Choose not to be depressed. Interesting. I'm not sure how much of a choice it is, but you can obviously take actions. Depression is treatable. Implications of him being emasculated by his high achievement sister. Okay, that's a good, interesting read into that. Lily did something terrible, just cry about it to manipulate people into forgiving you, especially because we are so unused to seeing boys and men cry, right? That it's like, oh, wow, he must be legitimately sorry for this thing that he did. I think he's sorry he got caught. That's often the case, is people are not actually sorry about what they did. They're sorry that they got caught. Okay, enlightened female gets the chef's kiss of the week. A lot of males will show their vulnerabilities and struggles as a manipulation tactic. I suspect this is the case, especially knowing he owned the horrific account. 15 Jessica says, weird. I have depression too, and I have managed to avoid bullying people online. Yep, not an excuse. This time, however, Charles wasn't calling to complain about the usual family conflicts, which were often about his mother's frustration with his passivity, his lack of drive, the amount of time he spent playing video games. It's really bad, Charles told his sister. I did something really bad. It took him a long time to tell her what. "We're going to figure this out," she assured him when he finally choked out a description of the Instagram account. She suggested he start by taking responsibility. He remembers writing his apology with her on the phone, the two of them editing it together. He posted it on Instagram that night. Okay, here's his apology. "I completely betrayed people who considered me a friend, and I cannot even begin to explain how disgusting I feel. All things that were portrayed on the account do not actually portray my true feelings about people of color. I want to be someone with integrity, someone who cares about people, and someone who people can trust. I have not lived up to that at all. There's no way for me to rationalize why I did what I did. It was all just my stupid judgment of what would entertain my friends. I cannot express enough that no one but me deserves any hostility or consequences. I don't expect forgiveness because my actions are unforgivable." Then, exhausted from crying, he fell asleep. The account had started at a chain restaurant called The Melt that was known for grilled cheese sandwiches. Charles was sitting in a booth with three friends, two of them the children of first generation immigrants from China, and the third a white boy who carried the cachet of also being friends with the high school's popular kids. It was a winter weekend day, sometime late in 2016 or early 2017, and the four boys, as they later explained in interviews and court documents, were doing what they always did when they were together, trying to make one another laugh. As they waited for their food, Charles, just like boys will be boys, it's what we always do together. It's what we always do together. Make racist memes about our female friends. Expired milk, BS overload, opening the airlock. Ah. Enlightened female. If that was my brother, I would contact the school board and say he admitted it, put him on blast, and proceed to disown him. Can't find your tiny violin. As they waited for their food, Charles scrolled through pictures on his phone, memes he'd made, photos he had saved for future memes. His model was the stuff he saw online in YouTube videos and subreddits, material that seemed funny precisely because it was offensive. Charles didn't think too deeply about the morality of that kind of thing. What mattered was that these memes made his friends laugh. Humor was the glue. I just stuttered. Humor was the glue of their friend group. I get very self-conscious about that. I used to stutter quite a bit. So anytime it happens, I get self-conscious about it. Anyways, probably like mentioning it doesn't help. Okay. They were the class clowns and the envelope pushers. The ones far more focused on cracking one another up in class than on whatever they were supposed to be learning. Put downs, roasts, and pranks were how they jockeyed for status. Charles showed the other boys a photo of his friend Anna wearing a little black dress and a white coat. Anna, who has a black father and a white mother, had posted on Instagram with the caption, "I want to go back to the old way." "Does she really, though?" Charles said. When we talked about this moment more than a year later, he wasn't sure if he made the joke more explicit. If they really went back to the old way, Anna would be enslaved. The rationalization for these photos sounds similar to rationalization for pornography. Yeah. Oh, it's just to make my friends laugh. Abby says, but the fact that it wasn't even just offensive humor, it was targeting specific girls. Why did he have to bring in classmates? Very, very, very true. This is funny. Instead of a boy mom, we have a boy sister. Whatever he said, the others laughed. So he turned the joke into a meme right there at the Melt, stitching Anna's post to an old-fashioned engraving of a naked black man hanging from a tree while being beaten by a white man. He captioned it, "Do you really, though?" "You should post these somewhere," his white friend said. Okay, this is 4 kids. This isn't like one deranged kid. How do they find this stuff funny? It's like, what is broken in these poor children, like, that they find this funny? And that they should make an account. You should post these somewhere. Then suggested Charles make an Instagram account expressly for this kind of edgier content. They all said they would follow it if he did. By the way, people, things you put on the internet are there, maybe not forever, but be careful what you put out into the public internet of the web. So Charles made a new private account and called it Young Savage, a play on Young Savage. By March, it had 14 followers, including Charles himself. The first few followers were Charles's close friends, all juniors like him. The remaining 6 weren't in Charles's inner circle. 3 were juniors he was friends with, but didn't spend a ton of time with outside of school, and 3 were sophomores he knew casually because one of them was in his Mandarin class and had introduced him to the others. 6 of the followers were white. The rest were Asian, Latino, or Middle Eastern. No black kids. Looking back, Charles traces his offensive humor to video games because if you played a single game of League of Legends online, you were almost guaranteed to hear a barrage of racist terms and homophobic slurs from other players. As you all are saying, rationalizing, that doesn't make it acceptable just because it happens in certain spaces and maybe even in a mainstream kind of way. It's still wrong. In the online kingdom where edge lords reigned, you gained citizenship by signaling approval. On Reddit forums, there were memes that had been upvoted by a lot of people. And in 2017, a lot of those memes found humor in things that objectively weren't funny, which was kind of the point. Racist jokes about water slides, schmetaschmelia, the R word, the I word, MSs, the HOLOCAUST, people with disabilities. Okay, so are those things that we should be joking about? Do girls joke about stuff like that? Good point, Zay. 14 followers is sending me. You did this all for 14 dweebs. Right? Right. Right. Very, very true. Let's be real. Black men would find this stuff funny because if there's anything any man can bond over, it's misogyny. It was easy to laugh at those things when they weren't about you, and you could prove you belonged in the kingdom by laughing even if they were. Like with all these jokes in the back of my mind, I know it's wrong, he says. It's offensive. That's part of what the humor comes from. My friends, do not be afraid to call out stuff, even if it's amongst your friends. Don't be afraid you're going to lose social status. You're not. And don't be afraid that the friendship is going to degrade if you call it out. It's either not or it's not a friendship you really need to save, right? Do you want to be friends with people making racist jokes? No. Call this stuff out. I've called it out. I've called out racism amongst people like in my private life. I've called out, people making offensive jokes and stuff. I'm just like, don't joke about that in front of me. And it's happened to me too. I think I made a joke about like 9/11 or something. And one of my friends was like, don't joke about that. And I was like, you know what? You're right. So I think that there are some sacred cows. Is that the word? Like some things that we should just not touch with jokes, right? Yes. Existential. I call out everyone, even my grandparents, they're 90. Just call it out. If we're not calling it out in private, that has to be the place where it any change is made, right? Any change originates is at least that's literally the least we can be doing. You do not want those people around you. Totally, totally, totally agree. It's okay if they think you're uptight. It ain't cool. It's not enough to say, "Oh, it's funny. It's a prank, bro. It's just a joke. Can't you take a joke?" When you say, "Can't you take a joke?" it places the like, now the problem is the victim. It's a very victim blamey like tactic to be like, "Oh, it's just a joke. Can't you take a joke?" That actually enhances the abuse or the bullying, is like saying like it's a joke and it's your problem if you have an issue with it. Existential. I have a very high tolerance for dumb shit, so I'm calling you out. You messed up. Something about the surprise of it, something about it being transgressive, shocking, not meant to be said or even thought, which meant the worse it was, the funnier it would be. I guess the humor just got darker and darker as I explored more of the internet, Charles says. Ironic racism could feel like something that just happened, hatched in the peculiar incubator of inside references, digital gags, and detached exaggeration that is Gen Z culture. Although there is evidence that white supremacist and neo Nazi groups have actively pushed this kind of humor into the mainstream. Because Reddit has improved its enforcement abilities since 2017, much of what Charles and his friends used to see there has migrated to platforms like 9gag and iFunny and Discord, or has been transformed into videos on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. In 2017, offensive humor was pretty commonplace at Albany High School amongst white and Asian boys. Shortly after the account was discovered, a senior named Jillian Guffey wrote, "What does it all mean?" in the Albany High School newspaper. The constant exchange of offensive memes breeds a vicious competition where the jokes get increasingly more shocking until the initial jokes are no longer very outrageous, she wrote. If every time we open our social media accounts we are met with offensive memes, it's only natural for us to get used to that type of media. Today, Charles says that if he saw the account as an outsider, he would conclude the person made it who was filled with hate. Not just because of the content of the pictures, which were bad enough, but also because he targeted specific people, including his Black friends. Anna, in particular, had been one of his closest friends since 8th grade. The fact that it was people that I had interactions with on a daily basis definitely made it look like I hated these people, he says, which I don't, which I can see that. I I believe him when he says that, but it doesn't matter if you don't hate them and they're your friends. You are treating them so badly that it's totally indistinguishable from whether you actually hate them or not. You don't treat someone that you have good feelings about in this way. If you do, you are deranged in your brain. If a guy makes an R word joke around you, run. They are not joking. Enlightened Female says, I have a hard time calling out stuff like this because I hate confrontation. I'm working on it, though. At this point, I either stay silent or call it out. And that's something that, you can improve with practice, too. He knows this is hard to believe and that it sounds like he's making excuses. All the pictures are super messed up, he says. It's definitely racist. I'm not in denial about that, but the way I explain it, I feel like it still makes it seem like I am. During the period when Charles was posting racist images on his Young Savage account, he also wrote a thoughtful essay about racism that connected the hypocrisy of the founding fathers with the failures of Reconstructionism and the present-day prison system. Perhaps the essay was written just to get a good grade. Or perhaps these two parts of his brain had found a way to coexist inside his skull, like neighbors who take the same elevator to side-by-side apartments in the same building, but never engage in conversation. The evening of the account's discovery, so we're still on the same day. This is so wild. John Doe, the boy whose phone Rosie had borrowed, went to see the movie Kong Skull Island with two of his closest friends, a white boy and an Asian girl who were both also sophomores. In the middle of the movie, one of their phones began to buzz. Guys, the girl whispered, "Come on, you have to see this." Out in the lobby of the theater, she showed them. Her phone was blowing up with questions, comments, and accusations. "Racist," they said. "Is this your account?" The same thing was happening to all three of them. It had something to do with an Instagram account they followed, Young Savage. People seemed to think the three sophomores were intimately involved, which none of them could figure out. They barely knew Charles, who was a grade above them. The girl whose phone was blowing up was in the same Mandarin class as Charles, and he had suggested she follow the account. The other two sophomores followed it as well because the three of them did almost everything together. None of them could remember much about what was on the account, and when they went to look, it had already been deleted. Doe was following more than 1,000 accounts, and he says it was only later when he saw photos of the posts he realized he'd interacted with Young Savage at all. In fact, he had liked many of the posts and commented on two of them. But that night at the theater, he couldn't remember much other than it had seemed edgy, in the same vein as YouTubers like iDubbbz and Filthy Frank, whose accounts he followed and who were known for their provocative antics, which I'm not going to read that because that's totally disgusting. It was never anything that I'd actively look up and peruse through or honestly thought about deeply, Doe says now. He was a default double tapper who scrolled and liked, scrolled and liked. Later, he asked himself why that was. "I've wondered why back then I didn't recognize that as problematic," he says, referring to the account. "Why did I entertain that? Why did I not say anything?" Yeah, who cares why he did it? It's unacceptable regardless. Um, One thing you can rely on is men doing the most heinous, disgusting things known to humanity and then being defended for it, while women and girls get burned at the stake for anything. Thank you. Great comment. Why, this is a very good question though. Why would the follower, it's not just about Charles now at this point, it's also about the followers. Why would the followers entertain this? This is extreme bullying of their classmates. Is this how they were? Is this some issue with how they were raised or how they were brought up through the school or whatever? Like, at what point, anyone with any decency would see that and say, "This is totally unacceptable. Like, I have to say something." I feel like, right? Anyone with any decency. Expired milk. I've never heard of them either. I'm glad I've never heard of these YouTubers these boys follow. I've never heard of Andrew Tate before he got arrested. I hadn't either. But also, we should take note. You don't like something without looking at it. And he commented on the posts too. So yeah, how do you comment without like absorbing what it is? But on March 20th, 2017, he was thinking only about how to control the damage. At 15, he was a self-described social butterfly, a talented dancer and stylish dresser with a combination of sweetness and coolness that made him appealing to both teachers and peers. To me, this reads very coded as gay, especially the fact that he had female friends that he hung out with. Not, necessarily, but it's definitely coded that way. I was trying to save my perceived popularity and public image, he says. This was directly attacking that and me as a person. When he got home after the movie, he posted a message to the 1,200 or so followers on his main Instagram account. "I did not create this account," he remembers writing. "I do not condone what was posted on this account." It went on a paragraph-length defense against the accusation that he was racist. If anything, his post, which he labored hours over for hours, made things worse by knowing about it and not saying anything. You are condoning this, someone replied. So, it's very fair, very, very fair assessment. That night he paced in his room, unable to sleep. So this is a good point. The people who perpetrated this, they did also suffer. And I feel like they didn't suffer more than the victims, but it's not good. None of this, like, bullying people doesn't doesn't do anything good for you, the bully, either. Usually, I mean, unless you're like a psychopath or something, sociopath, where you can do this stuff without any emotional involvement on your part. But they are, Hey, Joan. Hope you're doing well. We're deep into this article, but there's still quite a lot of it left. Hopefully my voice will hold up. I should probably try to use my whisperier voice or something. Usually by the end of 2 hours, I'm like, my voice is. Ugh. Okay, that night he paced his room, unable to sleep. It was still a child's room, the walls covered with book fair posters from elementary school. And when I first read this, I did audibly say, "Aw," but I think that's a good detail that this author included, that these are kids. Like, it really does hammer in this idea that these are kids doing this to other kids. These are boy children doing this to girl children. How early this stuff starts in males, the abuse of women and girls. It starts so early. He circled the bed, a mattress on the floor, so that his blind and elderly cat, 1 year older than he was, could climb in easily. His steps powered by self-loathing and anxiety. Although I will say that this author, a female author, does a lot to humanize these perpetrators. I mean, this is like he put his mattress on the floor so his elderly cat could climb up onto it. There's no details like that about the victims in this essay at all. Okay, why are we humanizing? We don't need to know that detail about this boy. It humanizes him. We don't need that. He thought, what have I done? He didn't want to tell his parents, didn't want to risk their seeing him as he suddenly saw himself. I was scared they were going to think I was a racist, he said. In my self-reflection, that was a big question. Am I a racist? What makes someone a racist? I mean, this is not like, it's not even like mild. This is like hardcore racism and misogyny. I don't want to, we should definitely not leave out the misogyny piece of this, at least in our analysis. Yeah, Sloan says, it doesn't matter how bad he feels. He's not the one being abused. What about the victims? They do, yeah, that humanization of, and it's very, very common in articles about men who do the crimes, that we hear about. Oh, he's such a good guy. Oh, he had a good career, blah, blah, blah. He was always helping me out in the neighborhood and stuff. And it's like, you don't have to humanize him. They did an awful thing. Humanize the victims. Spoilers. We are going to get there. I don't know how to power through this any quicker. Here's where we are in this. We are halfway. KM. Okay. Tuesday night school board meetings usually didn't draw a big crowd, but on March 28th, 2017, 8 days after the account's discovery, every chair was taken. Some people sat on the floor, others spilled into the hallway. Less than a week earlier, KTVU, a local evening news channel, had aired a story about the Instagram account that featured partly blurred pictures of some of the posts and an interview with the mother of one of the Black girls who had been targeted. The town was in an uproar. Seated on a curved dais beneath the city seal, the members of the school board moved through the mundane items on their agenda until it was time for public comment. Over the next 3 hours and 20 minutes, some 45 speakers shared their grief and rage, not just about what happened at Albany High School in the past weeks, but also what happened over previous years and even decades. Many Black and Latino speakers said that they had grown up in Albany or raised children and grandchildren there and had experienced racism or sexism or bullying that went unaddressed. This stuff is part of Albany's history, and for you to say that it is some isolated incident says more about you than it does about the history of the city, one speaker charged, addressing the school board. So this flashpoint event really brought up a lot of stuff that had been sort of festering there for a long time. All right, I'm going to power through a little bit because this article is quite long. So just put on your podcast listening. I mean, you can absolutely talk in the chat, but I'm just going to read for a little bit. A Black Albany parent who had a daughter in second grade talked about growing up nearby in Oakland, where he said he went to at least as many funerals as birthday parties. That's why he and his wife chose to raise their family in Albany, where his daughter would be safe. His voice thrummed with sorrow and fury. What is the point of working hard in school and doing the things you have to do, and then growing up and getting a good job and making enough money to send your kids to school in a place that's great if they're gonna get treated like this? Over and over, speakers advocated for the harshest possible punishment. Heads need to roll, one parent said. Somebody's got to be expelled over this. Another speaker, a student, said she hoped the account followers' lives would be ruined. About 2 hours into the meeting, Anna's father stepped up to the lectern. He had first moved to Albany while getting his mechanical engineering degree at UC Berkeley. And he had an air of authority that had quickly established him as a spokesman for the families of the affected girls. Discipline must be meted out, he told the board, and the appropriate discipline in this case was expulsion. He raised a warning finger. And one last thing, I'm going to say this one time, and I'm going to say it real slow. If we don't get the right decision here, may God have mercy on this city. At this point, the school's top administrators already seem to have lost interest in sorting through the levels of culpability among the school's different account followers, likers, and commenters. Some students who followed the account at first received 2-day suspensions, but those were soon increased to the maximum suspension allowed under state regulations, 5 days, regardless of how much he or she interacted with the account. That decision would end up having lasting repercussions for both the students and the school district. Because most of the followers received the same punishment, it was easy for teachers, students, and parents to conclude that everyone had been involved to the same extent. According to subsequent lawsuits, school officials soon began referring to the account followers collectively as the harmers. Ice Goddess says, this makes me wish there were girls only schools. That's something I want to talk about at some point, but I actually think that girls should be taught by female teachers. I have reasons why I think that. Separate but equal is really dangerous territory to tread in, but I do think that girls thrive more in a separatist educational environment. I don't know what studies there have been none about that, but we aren't getting out of the trenches. Going to a girls' school was wonderful. Expired Milk also went to a girls' school. All right. The day after the school board meeting, A stood on the floor of the high school gymnasium. Like, I really like her. Everything about her in this article I really like, but it's just so it's just a shame A stood on the floor of the high school gym in gray leggings and a green army jacket, holding a microphone in one hand and her phone in the other. Students in the bleachers leaned forward, straining to hear her trembling voice. It was the school's annual diversity assembly, and A was reading something she had written called I Will Not Stand. She described a young boy of color who had come into the ice cream parlor where she worked and whose mother asked if Albany High School would be a good place for him. She noted how sad she felt when she realized she couldn't answer in the affirmative. So I will not stand for it, she said. I will not stand for feeling unsafe in your own school. I will not stand for being shamed for something so strong and beautiful. I will not stand for being belittled and beat down. I will not stand for people trying to shove me into their perfect little stereotype. After she uttered the final I will not stand in her list, she sat down cross legged on the gym floor. By the end of the assembly, most of the students in the bleachers were on the gym floor too, called down by a student speaker who asked for a show of solidarity. By now, Charles was facing expulsion, as was one of his close friends, a Chinese American account follower whose racist comments on the post indicated a higher level of involvement than the others. That second expulsion was later blocked by a judge. A third student, the one who touched A's hair, had agreed to go on independent study for the rest of the year. But the others were returning to school, and as their suspensions drew to a close, administrators found themselves confronting another problem. Somehow, the kids who followed the account and the Black girls who were affected by it were going to have to go to school together. So the kids were going to be suspended, but eventually they're going to have to all go back to school together. And they're going to have to sit in the same classroom. And you're going to have to sit in the classroom with someone who, you know, was part of this abuse of you and harassment. That sounds awful. How can you make that environment safe? And very often in a situation like that, it would be the victim who's like, well, I guess I'll go do homeschool, right? How often are victims of bullying the ones who are forced to retreat and forced to leave? And the perpetrators, they just carry on as normal. They've made that environment hostile for these girls. How are they expected to learn in that environment? Eventually, school administrators hit upon a plan. A local nonprofit called Seeds, services that encourage effective dialogue and solutions, would hold a mediation session between the two groups of students on the day the 11 followers, likers, and commenters were to return to school. So this sounds like one of those kind of bullshitty, like diversity training type seminar things, mediation session. R-word victims are told to flee as well. Victims are never protected. Expired Milk says mediation. That's exactly what my school did. It's like, I don't know, a mediation, like, it just makes, it's like, does it help the victims? Does it help the victims? Really? Does it help anybody? Well, let's see. Let's see what happens. The mediation was optional, but the 11 followers agreed to attend. Their motivations and expectations varied. Some wanted a chance to apologize to the girls in person or deliver apology letters they had written. Others just wanted to get back to school. I was kind of looking forward to this in a weird sense, Doe says, because I thought this was going to be an opportunity to explain myself. So, if they want to apologize, apologies go a long way. Restitution, remorse for your actions, if it's sincere and comes from a place of sincerity and not just, oh God, I'm sorry I got caught, that is very meaningful. If they do actually want to apologize for real. He had spent days trying to understand why he hadn't said something when he first saw the account. Various explanations presented themselves. He had thought of himself as peripheral, a sophomore eavesdropping on conversations among a group of juniors. If someone was going to say something, Shouldn't it be someone inside the group? But what if those circumstances made him more responsible instead of less so? What if the fact that he didn't really know the account creator made him uniquely qualified to blow the whistle on the whole thing, or at least to separate himself from the situation? Why was he thinking it over only now? I felt like I had a lot of opportunities to unfollow this account that I didn't take, he says. So he wasn't really in the inner circle, but he saw it and he didn't say anything. And like the fact that he wasn't in the inner circle, well, that does that make him more culpable or blamable or less? Um, he wasn't really good friends with these guys, so he could have, been the whistleblower. This guy is the guy that says not all men, definitely. Okay. The day before the mediation session, someone associated with the Albany High School Feminist Club sent out a text. I love this. I love this, that it's the feminist club, because really this is a misogynistic issue at the heart of this. This is not a racism thing. Again, racism is a huge problem, but this is misogyny, where racism is used as the tool to perpetrate the misogyny. To me, it seems very clear that that's the case. Obviously it was racist too, but it's that intersection of all the victims were girls. Every single victim was girls. So sent out a text about a protest planned so the day before the mediation session, someone from the feminist club sent out a text about a protest planned by two other student clubs, the Black Student Union and the school's chapter of Amnesty International. The protest would coincide with the suspended students' return to school and begin at the mid-morning break with a sit-in in the main lobby. Please share this with basically anyone you know who believes these harmers should not be let back into our school, the text instructed. The message was forwarded from person to person, eventually reaching the harmers themselves. School administrators got wind of the protest, but they decided to go forward with the mediation, which would be held in the same building where the protest was planned. What could go wrong? So they're going to have this mediation, and at the same time, this massive student protest is going to happen because these kids do not want these kids back in school with them. Room 104 is a classroom big enough for a couple of saggy couches and an oversized armchair pushed up against the windows. On the day of the mediation, the 11 Instagram followers sat in red-seated chair desks on the side of the room closer to the door. The targets and a group of their supporters sat across from them. The moderators sat at either end. The girls had been in high spirits before the session began, snapping photos, buoyed by both jitters and hopefulness. But now the tension in the room was palpable. I could feel the angry, anxious, nervous energy everyone was feeling, Anna remembers. According to a timeline created by Seeds and later filed in court, the moderators started with what was supposed to be a neutral, low-impact question, something like, what are some of the things you really like about Albany High School? They passed a rock around the room to signal each person's chance to reply. A rock which also could be used as a weapon. I don't know if I would choose a rock as the talking stick. That part went well enough, although a number of the girls on the targeted side of the room opted to pass the rock along without speaking. Then the moderators asked the people who had been affected by the account to talk about how they felt when it was discovered and how they had been impacted since. A recalls saying that her sister had asked her why she was so sad all the time. I shouldn't have to tell an 8-year-old that I'm being bullied and I can't feel good about myself, she said. I shouldn't have to say that. The girls cried. Some of them yelled. They explained how deeply betrayed they felt. After everyone had a chance to speak, the Instagram group was asked to respond. So the girls are crying. They're saying they're betrayed. They're really upset. And now the boys get a chance to speak, because got to give the boys a chance to speak too. That's when things began to go terribly, horribly wrong. The first problem was that the main culprits weren't in the room. The mediation was for students who were returning to classes, so the 3 students who were considered the most culpable hadn't been invited. The 11 followers who came to the mediation kept wanting to explain the limits of their involvement, to point out that they weren't the ones who actually made the posts. One boy had only started just following the account, just started following the account. Another hardly ever went on Instagram and said he had never interacted with the account. A couple of others said they had liked the posts without really taking in the contents. It wasn't me. They each wanted to say, I'm not the one who did this. I'm not racist. They can still say, I'm sorry. They can still say, I'm sorry, I didn't call this out. That's what I should have done. I didn't call this out. That's what I should have done. And as a result of that, it was allowed to go on and all these posts were made and it hurt you. And I'm sorry. And I don't want you to be hurt. And whatever I can do in the future, let me know. And I will do that because I want to make this up to you, because you do not deserve to be a victim. And any part that I had in this, let me make up for it in some way. I'm beholden to you. Right? That's what they needed to say. They didn't need to say, oh, well, it wasn't me. Well, it wasn't my responsibility. But these are children. So do you expect them to have that maturity level? No. I mean, most adults don't even have that maturity level. So people bully with impunity and they expect to never face any consequences, and people witness it and they're party to it and they say nothing and they expect to never face any consequences, and victims are just supposed to shut up and go away. But the distinctions that felt so important to the account followers meant little to the people who had been targeted. Who cared which of them drew the noose or compared A to a gorilla? The point was that the people in the room had seen those things and given them their approval, whether overt or implied. I really thought they would own up to what they did and, kind of apologize, A later told a news crew that covered the sit-in. And a lot of it was them defending themselves and constantly saying, well, I didn't really add to it by liking and commenting. I didn't really think I was a part of it. And none of them were like, I'm so sorry. I'm taking full responsibility. I hate what I did. I don't agree with that. I didn't hear that. The people, can we call them girls? I agree. Call them boys and call them girls. Sexism is the foundation on which all tyranny is built. Every social form of hierarchy and abuse is modeled on male over female domination. Don't let it suck up your life force. According to interviews with people who were there, the individual responses of the account followers varied significantly. Some were remorseful and contrite, others were cocky and disengaged. All were desperately uncomfortable. Many wouldn't look up or meet the eyes of their accusers. The more emotional the targeted girls and their friends were, the more some of the followers focused on their own level of culpability rather than the pain and hurt in front of them. Bro chill is how A characterizes their attitude. Why are you taking it so seriously? Bro chill. Why are you taking it so seriously? Oh my God, I don't know if we're gonna be done in 20 minutes. This is an extra long stream today. It's just a prank, bro. It would have been different if they had been able to talk one-on-one, says Murphy, the boy who initially showed the account to the girls. Then he wouldn't have been so worried about what his male friends thought of him. I think it's because we're guys, Murphy said, where it's like we don't want to show weakness almost. As the morning wore on, Carrie felt as if she were part of a collective panic attack. The emotions had been building inside her since the day she stood in the bathroom photographing the post with Rosie, now burst out of her mouth in a kind of howl. I thought I knew you guys, she remembers yelling. I was going to go to prom with you. By 11 a.m., a couple of hundred student protesters, most of them in the upper grades, had gathered on the floor of the main building. just yards from room 104, where the mediation session was still underway. They sat cross-legged on the red and white checked floor, taking up every inch of space. More protesters had taken over the bright red staircase that led to the upper floors. Some held signs that said things like, "I will not stand for racism," and "We are the human race." It was silent, says one teacher, who requested anonymity because she feared retribution for talking to the press. And the expression on their faces was just fierce. Like, "You can't intimidate us." It was powerful. A few minutes earlier, Val Williams, the district superintendent, had sent out a community-wide email announcing that a rope that looked like a noose had been found hanging from a tree at a park next door to the high school. It turned out to be a rope swing, but by the time Williams sent out a correction about an hour later, tensions inside the mediation session, already at a peak, had reached a boiling point. The girls and their friends were certain the followers had hung the noose. Given what they'd seen on the account, it wasn't hard to believe. Some of the followers were infuriated by the accusation and skeptical that the noose was even real. Their dismissiveness further incensed the girls, some of whom stormed out of room 104. There, a few strides away, were the protesters. "You guys need to see what you've caused at the school," one of the targeted girls said when she returned to the room. "It's time to get out in the hallway and stand in front of that crowd so everyone can see your faces." In declarations filed in court, school administrators say that the roughly 250 students at the sit-in remained quiet and respectful when the account followers came out of the room. But others who were there, students, parents, and staff, say the protesters didn't stay completely silent for long. Ned Purdom, then an English and journalism teacher at the school, recalls hearing a rumble move through the crowd as the perpetrators came out. "For a few seconds, it was very quiet," he says. "Just this silent standoff," he adds. Then the shouting started. So the kids come out of the mediation into this giant protest of hundreds of students who are now shouting at them. This is the reaction of these anti-racist kids is admirable, actually. And it's what these kids should have done, right? When we see racism, we should shout about it. We should shout about it. That's the correct reaction. "Everyone was hurling insults at us." Murphy says everyone was bashing on us. Oh, boo-hoo, boo-hoo. As John Doe stood in front of everyone, his body buzzed with adrenaline. But his mind was utterly blank. He kept asking himself, is this really happening right now? I was just completely shut off, dissociated, detached from the whole thing. It didn't feel real, he recalls. That's easily the most surreal experience I've had in my life. I'm sure it was, because these are people I've known forever, some since kindergarten. People that I thought knew me, that I thought I knew. They thought they knew you too. They didn't think of you as a person who would go along with this extreme racist, misogynistic stuff. His teachers were there, even his friends. Later, these friends would tell him they had tried to go to class, but had been told by their instructors to attend the protest instead. And adding to the weirdness of the moment, his mother had arrived. She had come to the school to pick him up at the end of the mediation and had witnessed the whole thing. She pushed through the crowd until she stood between her son and the protesters with her arms thrown wide as if to shield him with her body. "You're the bullies," she told the crowd. Is this a boy mom moment? So one of the perpetrators is getting yelled at by the anti-racist students, and his mommy comes and shouts at them, "You're the bullies. Protect my baby. He would never hurt anybody." Later, Doe would feel grateful to his mom for sticking up for him, but in the moment, his only thought was, "This is my mom in front of the whole school embarrassing me." "Get them out of here," she yelled to the teachers and administrators who were watching the scene in full. "This isn't safe." Then one of the account-affected girls was on her feet, yelling at Doe's mother, "Shut up, B-word. You don't know what you're talking about. Racism is not the same as getting yelled at, okay? You hung that noose," somebody yelled. "Whose mom are you?" Just as things seemed ready to spin even further out of control, the followers were hustled back into room 104. By early afternoon, there somewhere between 300 and 700 students were out of class. So half the school's students were at this sit-in. The bulk were at the sit-in, but a sizable number were milling around in groups, intoxicated by the intense emotions of the day and the sudden absence of restrictions. Outside, news vans were lined up in front of the school. A news helicopter circled overhead. Wild. Most of the people targeted by the account had joined the protest along with their friends. After an administrator told them that they had to clear a path so as not to create a fire hazard, the protesting students had moved outside. And I think that there's like video of this on YouTube from news reports and stuff. They sat on either side of a long strip of pavement that extended from the school steps to the curb. The Instagram followers were meant to walk this gauntlet, which was being described as a walk of shame. Good. The protesters insisted no harm would come to them if they did. They just wanted the account followers to see how hurt they were, they told the school administration. The parents of the account followers were trying to figure out another way to get their kids out of the school. Some of them, including Doe's mother, had been sequestered in a storeroom for hours while school administrators tried to determine their next move. Student protesters were looking in or banging on the windows of both the storeroom and a conference room to which the account followers had been moved after the collapse of the mediation. So they're basically trapped in this school, these kids. This seems like terrible planning on the admin's part. This is so dumb. It's a bloodbath. Should have been handled better. It's so deranged. Such a mess. I can't believe the administrators would have agreed to parade the harmers in front of the whole school. It's such a weird situation. Setting that, well, we are going to be moving into that shortly. We're reaching the end of the article, believe it or not. Let's see what happens. Okay, at 2:22 p.m., the Albany Police Department was contacted by an unidentified caller who then handed the phone to the school's principal, Jeff Anderson, who is white. They have to mention that. Anderson wanted to report a disturbance at the school and they needed some support. School officials told the police they were concerned about how to get the Instagram followers out of the school safely. According to a PD report, all available Albany PD resources were immediately deployed to the area around the high school, including some officers who had been scheduled to attain a training outside the city. A nearby intersection was blocked off. So this was intense enough that the entire police department had to show up. A virtual cabbage says they aren't trapped. They just don't want to face the reality that they hurt a lot of people and they don't want to see that. This ended in court. I told you the worst. We had not heard the worst of this yet. I told you of this whole article, all this terrible stuff so far. We have not heard the worst of it yet. So hold on, we're almost there. The police recommendation was for 2 plainclothes officers who were already on campus to escort the involved students outside via back exit, a complicated route that involved crossing a courtyard and going through the lobby of the school gym to reach the sidewalk. 2 marked patrol cars would be waiting for them. At around 2:50 p.m., a physical education teacher arrived to accompany the Instagram followers alongside the 2 plainclothes detectives. When they got the signal, the students in the conference room shot across the hall to meet up with the parents who had been waiting in the storeroom and slip out through a back door into the courtyard. Then everyone just ran. Outside, the protesters were still waiting for the Instagram followers to walk the gauntlet. Then someone shouted from inside the building, "They're going out the back." By the time the Instagram followers and their parents reached the gym lobby, a large crowd of students had gathered outside, phones out, filming, yelling. An empty water bottle flew through the air and struck one of the mothers on the head. An empty water, I mean, like, you know, what does that mean? Empty water bottle, like a, you know, that could be harmless, or it could be like a Nalgene or something. As the Instagram followers remember it, their police escorts drifted out of sight. Yikes. It was too crowded to run, so the account followers had to shuffle single file. Suddenly, Murphy felt a sharp tug on his back. The PE teacher had his hand on Murphy's backpack to keep him from getting sucked into the crowd, and he had been pulled backward himself. The next thing Murphy knew, someone had flipped him around and was punching him in the face. The blows broke his nose. Blood gushed onto his shirt and his white Vans, pooling on the ground. Another account follower was also hit. Doe and the other sophomores and their parents made it to a minivan driven by his father, but the van was surrounded by students. We're trapped, one of the parents recalled. We can't move, we can't drive. They start shaking the car, pushing the car, and we're bouncing around inside, and I just don't understand how the hell this is all happening. The parent says, I don't know how to describe how terrifying it was. So they're getting physically assaulted. That's not good. The way to fight any of this stuff is not through physical violence, obviously. Okay, let me have a brief break to relax my throat a little bit, have some water. We're going to get into the legal side of this, and then that's it. That's the end. And it's actually shocking how this all turns out in the end. Ice Goddess says, I can't imagine being one of the victims, a girl going in front of court. Ugh. Abby is premonitioning the end of the article. The first lawsuit was filed a month later by 4 of the Instagram followers and their parents. They sued the school. Named as defendants were the school district and the superintendent, principal, and Melissa Full, who was the assistant principal at the time. The lawsuit argued that the Instagram posts themselves and the likes and comments were expressive or political speech, which is protected by the First Amendment. Not all speech, by the way, my friends, is protected by the First Amendment. There are plenty of things that you can't say and that are quite illegal to say in a criminal or civil manner. So there you go. And that because Young Savage was a private account created and interacted with outside school, the school district had no authority to punish the students for engaging with it. The students who had participated in the mediation session also argued the school had placed them in harm's way with reckless indifference during the sit-in by riling up the crowd with the erroneous email about the noose and failing to find them a safe way to leave the school. The second lawsuit came a little over a week later, filed on behalf of the 3 sophomores and another account follower who hadn't interacted with any of the posts. The second suit included a slightly different First Amendment argument. The district might have the right to discipline students because of hateful speech, but liking a post and following an account were not hateful in and of themselves, and thus were constitutionally protected. And that, I see that, right? Just following the account. If you follow an account and you don't interact with it at all, how responsible are you for any of the content that's posted there? I would argue liking does constitute a significant action because it's an endorsement. But straight following, people hate follow me. People hate follow stuff all the time, right? It doesn't mean that they agree with anything they're following. So that I do see that. But free speech issues were not the primary focus. Instead, the lawsuit argued that by exposing their identities and treating them as if they were responsible for the creation of the account, the district had made it impossible for these minimally involved students to safely return to school, thus depriving them of their right to education. By the end of June, Murphy and Charles would each file lawsuits of their own on free speech and other grounds, bringing the total of litigating students to 10. So, there are different levels of culpability in this. None of it's good, but yes. Thank you, Useless. To all the hate followers, please hit the like button. I will make more content, more content for you to hate watch. Right. What about the girl's right to education and the girl's right to dignity and peace, being able to live peacefully and free of harassment and molestation? Almost as soon as the lawsuits were filed, the parents of the account's targets began investigating whether they could sue the parents of the account followers. Most of the firms they approached weren't interested, perhaps because the families they wanted to sue didn't have the kind of deep pockets the school district had. A's mother, though, eventually found a lawyer to take her case, Elizabeth Riles, a Black woman who specialized in workplace discrimination and personal injury. But A wasn't interested in investing any more of her time or energy thinking about the incidents. She wanted the whole thing to go away. I know the feeling. Fewer than half of the Instagram followers had ever returned to school after the failed mediation session, but running into those who had was a daily source of tension. So this is really interesting, right? So they had 11 kids do this mediation session, the 11 kids who were following this Instagram account. And at least six of them didn't return to school. So some of them they were done at that school, which is probably better for everybody, right? They were the perpetrators, and it makes sense for their lives to be upended rather than the girls to have to be uncomfortable seeing them in class every day. But running into those who had was a source of daily tension. Just working on not being fazed by them being there was hard, she says. The followers had been punished as much as they could be, yet the impact of the account lingered. At school, she felt scrutinized, both for being Black and also for having been victimized. People assumed people that I didn't talk. Oh my God. I'm just getting exhausted is what's happening. And I apologize. We're almost done though. People that I didn't talk to would be way too nice to me or just kind of assume that I was some type of politically correct bomb that was about to go off and correct you, she said. Often she stayed home. This is so sad. This part of the story is so sad. Her mother worried about the way her once fearless child seemed to have lost her ability to climb out of bed in the morning. She gave A Chihuahua puppy to lift her spirits, but that too was a challenge. A made a point of walking the dog during school hours when she knew she wouldn't run into any of her peers. I didn't want to go outside, she recalls. I didn't want people to see me. This is a very, very strong paragraph about the effects of this victimization and what is really the impact on the victim here, right? Oh, goody. So her once fearless child seemed to have lost the ability to climb out of bed in the morning. For what? So these guys could laugh amongst themselves. It had to destroy a girl's life, basically. Over the course of the following school year, A's mother kept bringing up the prospect of a lawsuit. With the 1-year anniversary of the count's discovery coming up, they were running out of time to sue. You'll have no options after that. A remembers her mother telling her, "You're limiting a plethora of opportunities if you don't do anything." The word limiting hit hard because A did feel limited. She was a senior now and hadn't applied to any four-year colleges. But some of those followers were going to college, weren't they? They were going on with their lives. I already felt limited in certain aspects by my social class, she said. She decided to go ahead with the lawsuit. In March 2018, Elizabeth Riles filed a complaint in Alameda County Superior Court against Charles and the other two boys who were considered most responsible, along with their parents, for violation of A's civil rights, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, and invasion of privacy. One of the boys was also accused of battery for touching A's hair, as he should have been. That is a crime. A month later, the school district settled with 7 of the 10 Instagram followers who had sued. Okay, this is the worst part. Y'all ready for this? For 4 of those students, The settlements to be paid by the district's insurance were meant to cover any medical costs, counseling, and moving expenses or private school tuition. 3 boys who had returned to the high school received $80,000 cash settlements each after the court found the district had violated their First Amendment rights because they had never indicated any approval via a like or comment of the posts that targeted individual students. So if you follow a vile, racist, extreme racist account, you got $80,000, an ungodly amount of money. Wild. That to me, that's just absolutely mind-blowing. At a school board meeting soon after, parents of some of the targeted girls took the microphones, huddled together at the lectern. What did the girls get? What did the girls get from the school board? What did they get? A's mother wore a black leather jacket over a striped turtleneck. Her long blonde hair spread over her shoulders and her arms folded across her chest. Why are the followers of the accounts, they're the ones being treated like the victims? What did the actual victims get? How could you not have even said no? She demanded tearfully. What have you done? What you have done has been like putting salt in a wound, and our girls still have to go to school because they want to graduate. They have to go to school and hear these boys talk about how they're going to have a victory party. We're so close. Sorry, slowly, the last of the lawsuits made their way through the courts. By the fall of 2020, there were just 2 people suing the district, one of whom was Charles. The same 2 were also amongst the last remaining defendants in A's lawsuit. Charles sat for deposition after deposition, not really clear about which case he was being interviewed for. I definitely objectively think, okay, I'm in the wrong. And his classmate was in the right, he told me. She didn't really do anything wrong. Even so, he allowed the lawsuits to keep going, fighting on 2 fronts as plaintiff and defendant. A trial date for A's lawsuit was set for the end of November, I guess last year. 3 years and 8 months had passed since the account was first discovered. Oh no, this is in 2020. November 2020. Gee, nothing else was going on then. 3 years and 8 months had passed since the account was first discovered, but many of the students on both sides of the story were still struggling to get on with their lives. The pandemic shutdown intensified the feeling that they were stuck in an endless loop. A described her life as purgatory and fantasized about having the resources to leave town. So, they have graduated high school at this point, and these lawsuits are still going on. John Doe had continued the soul-searching journey that began after the account's discovery. By his sophomore year in college, he found he was grateful for the way the experience had changed him. He was more serious now than he'd been as a 15-year-old social butterfly, plagued by both anxiety and depression. Still, he thought he had gained more than he had lost. Had I just continued that trajectory at Albany, how I would be as a person, I think I would be worse off, he says. I would probably be less introspective, less critical. I would think less because I question things now in a way that I don't think I could have before had I not gone through the experience like this. So I think that's a positive, right? Like, that's good. He should learn something from this experience, right? Like that's the optimal situation, is like, I learned something. I reflect on how my actions affect other people. That's kind of good. That's not bad. Charles wasn't quite as resolved. He wanted to settle A's case, but he was having trouble coming to terms with the fact that he would have to hand over his own money. Funds were tight. He was still working a retail job and going to community college. He hadn't gotten anything from his own lawsuit, which his lawyer continued to appeal. It's hard, he says. It's not like I don't want them to get something out of it. It's just I don't want them to take it from me. This is such a just... You're the one who did it. Who else are they supposed to get it from? God, like, kids, take responsibility. Boys, take responsibility. On November 30th, 2020, the day the trial was scheduled to begin, Elizabeth Riles told the judge a settlement had been reached. Riles would not confirm the account, but Charles remembers agreeing to pay $15,000. Combined with settlements from the other defendants, some of them confidential, the amount going to A was meaningful, even if it wasn't quite as much as the $80,000 awarded to some of the account followers. So she did get some money, which is, softens the, you can use it to pad the wounds a little, I guess. Charles didn't learn anything. At least the other kid learned something, and we could feel a little, good about that, I guess. Males take responsibility challenge at a level of impossible. Why are the consequences of my actions inconveniencing me? Definitely. Okay. Afterwards, she sounded more relieved than jubilant. I'm very glad this chapter is over in my life, she said. Now she had a little money, a little freedom. I've been battling with myself about whether I should play it safe or travel and take bigger leaps that have been presenting themselves to me. She says, this is just kind of affirming to me that I should keep taking leaps because it's working. Shortly afterwards, she moved to the highlands of Guatemala to study meditation, metaphysics, and yoga at a retreat center by Lake Atitlan. She has been traveling the world ever since. So this is like a bit of a happy ending for A. Like, she took the money that she got out of this horrible thing and she traveled the world and studying yoga, like a girl after my heart. Charles's lawsuits kept going, his lawyers appealing to higher court with every loss until finally in June, the Supreme Court denied to hear the last appeal. So Charles, you're SOL, brother. You made your bed, you got to lie in it. The court is not going to help you at all. Okay, we're right here. We've made it. The finish line is in sight. This is like such a long, I've told Radical before, but my limit is 2 hours when I'm solo, because I'm just like, it's this, my weak ass vocal cords. Darren McNally, who is now the principal of Albany High School, has a bald pate, bushy reddish beard, and an implacable demeanor that belies his interest in the emotional lives of his students and their families. In 2017, when the Young Savage account was discovered, he was a first-year administrator. Today, most of the students involved are 23, around the age he was when he first started teaching. When he thinks about them, which is often, he thinks about the importance of teaching empathy and interpersonal connection, of helping students connect the dots between the more abstract lessons about injustice they receive in the classroom and the immediate impacts of their own actions on the human beings sitting in the desks next to them. Recall that Charles was writing about racism in America and what a horrible problem it is. He was writing, he wrote an essay about that. In the meantime, he's running this ultra racist Instagram account. So making no connections between the abstract things that you're studying and how they actually impact on a micro level. These kids had been instructed that these things are bad on an intellectual level, he said, referring to the racism and sexism of the Young Savage account, but not on a deeper interpersonal emotional level. And so they knew it would be transgressive, edgy to do this. They didn't understand the harm that could come from it. Schools can bridge the gap, McNally suggests, by building a capacity for reflection amongst young people who may not be in the habit of thinking deeply about their own or other people's emotions. Among young people, among young men. But doing so requires moving beyond the conventional calculations of school discipline, because girls let's do this sentence again. Building a capacity for reflection among young people who may not be in the habit of thinking deeply about their own or other people's emotions. What people are not in the habit of thinking about their own or other people's emotions? Is it girls? No, this is all girls do. Okay. But doing so requires moving beyond the conventional calculations of school discipline, in which the menu of responses to bullying or hate speech is limited to 3 choices: ignore, suspend, or expel. When the Albany community demanded the harshest possible retribution, it was in part because few people could imagine an alternative that didn't amount to shrugging it off or sweeping it under the rug. We live in a society that is so punishment focused, that is so focused on turning people into right and wrong and then punishing wrongness, that it's incredibly difficult to get people out of that mindset. He says, it makes me think about how we as a society have actually trained everybody that exclusion is what you do to people that are not right. I'm not really sure I agree with that. They should be punished. I don't know. Like McNally, Melissa Full has found herself in a contemplative frame of mind since the resolution of the lawsuits. Back in 2017, she interviewed every student she knew was involved on both sides of the account. Each of their stories was different. Many were heartbreaking. It is those overlooked particularities that she mourns now, the complexities that were lost in the rush to respond to the community's desire for immediate action and stern retribution. Back then, it felt as if she were in the middle of a conflagration. It was a fire line, she said, and everybody was passing the buckets. Her eyes filled with tears at the recollection. Some of us, me included, accidentally picked up some gas. We didn't know it, right? We were just passing the bucket, and I'm sorry that it was gasoline. I didn't mean to do any harm. I tried to pick up plenty of buckets of water, but when it's all moving so quickly like that, it all looks the same. So this article is adapted from Accountable, the true story of a racist social media account and the teenagers whose lives it's changed, by Dashka Slater. And interesting double entendre on the title there, Accountable, the Instagram account and the accountability. Oh boy. That was like physically, that's like a marathon for me. There was one comment I wanted to find and read to you guys that was a little bit down. Top comment: it's worth noting that half of Americans support a former president who publicly said similar things about millions of people. There's not even a doubt in my mind that Trump and Trumpism and all this stuff, MAGA, whatever, has set the stage for these things being acceptable. And, just paved the way for this base instinct of men to come out with no consequences whatsoever. Total impunity. Okay, I think this was the comment here. It's interesting that the racism is the primary focus of this whole story when it's coupled with deep misogyny that seems like an afterthought. The fact that these boys chose to direct their racist humor to the girls is no coincidence, no small thing, and no less damaging to humans and our communities than the racism. I was disappointed not to see the author delve more into the fact that many of the boys involved were people of color as well, and the complicated social factors at play there. So was the motivation racism or was it sexism? And the racism was simply the club they chose to use to diminish the girls, which is also the way that I described it too. Probably not an original thought on my part. Big disappointing sigh after that article. Wasn't it a crazy article though? I mean, it's just, oh my gosh. I felt like I really had to share that after I read that. I was like, that's the article for tomorrow because it's just wild. It's terrifying that Trump's gender-based attacks were ignored by so many. Ooh, okay. spend a few more minutes with you. Okay, so I probably maybe we'll talk about this truly an insane ride. You're welcome. Thank you so much. This was actually a big crowd. I was like, oh, it's gonna be like 4 people today because it's just like such a long ass article. But there was one other thing that I wanted to share, and I'm wiped out. I'm way too tired. So we'll have to look at it a little more in depth next week. I didn't realize that was going to take like 2.5 hours or more. Let's see if I can share this. So, this is something I definitely want to talk more about at another point. Yeah, there was a lot going on in that time period that I'm not surprised this got kind of swept under, right? Like this wasn't a national news. It really wasn't a national news story, right? Like all the stuff that I found was just like a little in the local news here and there. It wasn't obviously it's a huge issue for this town, but it just didn't make big like national news or anything. Joan of Arc's making her dream cabaret happen. That's cool. No kink-free cabaret. Love that. I've seen a cabaret showcase a few times. I dated a guy who was a juggler, professional juggler, a very long time ago. He was in Cirque du Soleil and stuff like that, but he was friends with a lot of circus people. So I did a lot of circus stuff for a while. I mean, I know cabaret is like a little different. It's like music but there's some overlap there. So let's see. AI is the latest weapon in the arsenal of school bullies. It's basically like if you've got, 1 or 2 pictures of a girl's face, you can make A plus Lisa Lore. If you have a picture or 2 of somebody's face, you can make video pornography of them. And kids are doing that. Boys are doing that to their girl classmates, and it's horrendous. So that may be something we talk about next week. And then we have this, which I thought maybe could be next week's article, something I've talked about. I swear to Christ, Pamela Paul is like hitting it out of the park all the time. But it's like everything she writes about is something I've talked about. I'm like, does Pamela Paul follow my YouTube channel? We've talked about her so many times. I'm like, I mean, she's not that big, like, has she Googled herself? Because she's looked herself up on YouTube, no doubt. I'm sure maybe my videos would come up. I don't know. We have read quite a bit of her stuff, but I have a video about this exact topic, and I don't know that I've really heard that many other people talk about this in this specific way. Like, I guess, feminist things, but this is a radical feminist article, my friends. So in the New York Times, which means it's a good day today. It's a good day. Why, hello. I like to spend a few minutes with y'all at the end. Yeah. Joan of Arc's cabaret is 100% clowns. Nice. I like that. Have a great weekend, Existential Gamer. I don't know. Anybody have anything else? I rode my bike today, 7.5 miles. I was thinking about swimming. I might be too damn tired to do that, but I'm doing pretty good. I felt great riding my bike. I got 2 PRs on Strava. Very low effort. I wasn't trying, and I got 2 PRs. So that's a good day too. That's pretty much it. I don't really have anything else. Oh yes, Radical is streaming. We're gonna be done. I'm sorry. I itch my nose and I itch everything because I just have the worst allergies ever. Ooh, enlightened females going sailing. I went sailing once. I actually sailed in a race. That was the one time I went sailing, as someone that I knew needed people to do this. And I was a rock climber, and they used to kind of recruit people from the climbing gym to come and do that. Blorbo has a final project. Good luck. Light female is packing for college. Lily's eyes are itchy and she can't stop sneezing. Yeah, I guess it's like I think very commonly, this is what I'll close with. Okay. We talked about male nature earlier in the stream. We talked about what happened on Reddit and everything, men harassing women, or boys harassing women, or boys harassing girls, or whatever. Often the solution is that you hear, oh, well, women should just get off the internet. Never post your picture on the internet. Never post a video on the internet. Never post anything on the internet. Well, so much of our world is on the internet right now. So if you tell women and girls, don't go on the internet because that's a place that's dangerous for you, is that different than telling girls don't go out in public because that's a place that's dangerous for you? Because it is. It's also dangerous for you. But you're just limiting women's options, so much. Sexual terrorism. Beautiful. Okay. Second chef's kiss of the stream goes to Useless Strawberry. It's sexual terrorism because it makes women alter their patterns of life. It makes them be excluded from public spaces. It's very damaging to our mental health and such like that. So it is what it is. And I know that is an option to get off the internet. I haven't done it. I don't want to shut up. I have a lot to say. I've been harassed and bullied. A lot of that article rang very true to me, especially that point about the fact that the people who do this stuff, I think one of the hardest parts of being bullied is seeing the people who bullied you just completely continue on as if, they are not impacted by it at all. They just do it. You live with the consequences. They continue on with no consequences, and they just continue on with doing what they were doing. And then especially when all this happens on the internet, you can see that that's happening. And meanwhile, you're greatly impacted by it. So it's awful to see bullies just continue on as if nothing happened, Yeah, and sometimes they do become successful. And it's awful. I'm very good about not looking at stuff. Like I've had that. That's my secret superpower, is that I can narrow my vision on the internet and only go to certain places. Like after I broke up with a boyfriend, I never looked at their Instagram or anything like that ever. Like not even once. because I was like, I just don't want to know. Like, it's not gonna make me feel better. It's just gonna hurt me more. So, yeah, but that can be one of the hardest parts of being bullied is the after the fact, you know? All right, I'm gonna go itch my nose. I hope that you all have a wonderful weekend. I don't know if we're gonna do any game streaming. I finished The Wild at Heart. I platinumed it. It was an amazing game. It was so much fun to play. And we want to play Life is Strange Before the Storm. But other than that, yeah, I don't know. Thank you all for the chat, for your wonderful comments. And that's it. Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Lord of the Rings saga. That was definitely the most epic project I've taken on up till this point. Yeah, it was epic as hell. All right, y'all. Little dance outro. Bye.